For our bag, we will need 2 coordinating exterior fabrics, a 7-inch zipper, lightweight interfacing, and cotton lining. We will be cutting our fabric pieces 9.5 by 8.5 inches. As explained in the homework, the length of our bag is 9.5 and the height is 8.5. This is important to note if you are sewing with a specific print or stripe. Just make sure everything is going in the direction you want it to. I like to mark the center of my stripes before cutting my fabric. And we are also cutting out zipper tabs out of either of your printed fabrics. Our zipper tab measures 3 inches by 1.25 inch. In our kits, I sent along lightweight interfacing, which you had the option to iron on or leave off. For thinner fabrics, I love using interfacing for bag stability. On these bags, I sometimes use a heavier weight interfacing, such as Pellon 808 on the exterior fabrics. I sent along lighter weight because it's just a little bit easier to sew with and a great introduction to interfacing if you haven't stitched with it before. Interfacing is completely optional, but I find it really adds to a handmade bag. And now we have our cutout pieces, including our zipper tabs, which we will now stitch to our zipper. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to stitch the tabs onto our zipper. First, I'm going to share how to do it and what the end result will look like so you can decide which method you would like to do. Then I'll repeat the video for you to follow along. The first method is to simply fold the tab in half with wrong sides together, matching the short ends. This method is quicker and a bit easier to stitch. With this method, we are stitching the folded edge to the zipper. And this is the interior of the bag with this method. The second method is to fold each tab short end in by 1/4 inch and then fold in half with the short ends together. This method is a bit trickier and adds a little bulk to your seam, but it does have a cleaner interior finish. With this method, we are inserting the end of the zipper in between the folded sides. Either of these methods work great for zipper tabs, but I like to give options so that you have a choice of which method you would like to use. This is the finished look for this method. And here are both options again. First is folding the tab in half with wrong sides together. And the second option is to fold each short end in 1/4 inch and then fold that in half with wrong sides together. Now we are stitching the tabs to our zipper. For both tabs, we are making sure the folded edges line up with the metal ends of the zipper. Be careful not to overlap. On the top of our zipper, keep the ends of the zipper closer together. The zip tab is wider than the zipper to give you room for stitching, but the extra material will be cut off. If you chose the second method for your zipper tabs, insert the zipper end into the folded edge. Match up the folded edges so the tab is sitting evenly on the end of the zipper, and pin it in place. Now we are ready to start sewing. Today I am sewing on my Janome Memory Craft 15,000 with my zipper foot E. My needle is moved over to my left to get closer to the end of my fabric. And we are going to stitch our first zip tab down to the zipper. Flip your zipper over to the other side and stitch the other zip tab down. With the tabs stitched, trim the excess fabric from the tab sides. Be sure to not cut the zipper. Now it's time to sew the body of our pouch. On your body pieces and zipper, find the center points and mark. We are finding the centers on one of the 9.5-inch sides, so mark at 4 3/4 of an inch. Do this on both the outer and the lining pieces. The center of our zipper is 3.5 inches. And now we layer our pieces. With the right side of exterior facing up, lay your zipper right side down with center points matching. Next, lay lining right side down on top of zipper. I find it a little bit easier to stitch with the exterior facing up, but you could stitch together either way. Starting from the middle point, pin or clip the top of your pouch, making sure all your layers are lining up evenly. Move your zipper pull out of the way to continue pinning. Depending on the tabs that you stitched, your zipper may be a little bit longer than the body. That's okay, at this point you may just have a little tail sticking out. With your zipper foot still attached, move your needle back to center. Stitch your seam with the zipper foot lined up to the edge of your fabric. When you get to stitching near your zipper pull, there are two ways to continue to stitch. First, you can come to a full stitching stop, remove your fabric, and pull the zipper tab. Start stitching where you left off and remember to backstitch. Another way to stitch is to leave your needle down and raise your presser foot and pull the zipper past your stitching. You can then lower your presser foot and continue stitching. Bring your pouch to your ironing board and fold right sides out. Lightly pull the fabric and iron your seam down. Be sure your lining is also pulled. The next step will be to top stitch our zipper. If you have a little tail from your zip tab, you can cut it off now. I am top stitching with my zipper foot attached and my needle moved to the right. If you have a top stitching foot, you can use that, but try not to sew over the metal on your zipper. Using a zipper foot means eyeballing your stitching a bit, but go slow and you can create a beautiful line. When coming to the end of your stitching, pull the fabric to be sure everything stays nice and flat. Now we're doing the same steps with the other side. Once again, find the center point on your zipper, exterior and lining fabric. With your lining facing up, layer your zipper on top, right side up. And then lay your exterior piece right side down. Pinned layers together, be sure to line up the center points. On your machine, move your needle back to the center. Again, while we're stitching this seam, when you come up to your zipper pull, use one of the methods that we talked about previously for moving the zipper pull out of the way. And once again, we are turning our pouch right side out and lightly pulling to flatten out our seam. If it feels like you weren't getting enough of a pull, you can open your zipper and work the fabric with your fingers to flatten the seam. Pin this in place, making sure your lining isn't caught anywhere on the back. Move your needle back to the right to top stitch your seam. Next, we are going to stitch our pouch body together. It is very important that you open your zipper because we will need it open to turn our bag right sides out. I don't open my zipper all the way to be sure I don't have my zip pull anywhere near my seam line while stitching. Take exterior front and back pieces and lining pieces right sides together. Push your zip tabs towards the lining. Pin or clip all the way around your pouch. Next, on the lining side of your pouch, find the center point on the long end. From this point, measure 1.5 to 2 inches on each side. You can simply mark the points or put a pin. We will be leaving this section open to turn our pouch right side out. Next, we are marking our corners to create the flat bottom of our pouch. On each corner, mark a 1-inch square. We will be stitching all the way around our pouch, starting at the first opening mark. When we come to each corner square, backstitch on the corner square line. We are cutting our corners, and by backstitching now, it'll prevent our corners from coming apart when cutting them. End the stitching at the other opening mark. Stitch your pouch with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can keep your zipper foot on or switch it out for your regular stitching foot. The foot I'm using has a side width of 3/8 of an inch, so the end of my fabric matches with the edge of my foot. If your fabric is bulky or you are having difficulty sewing through all the layers when it comes to this section on the pouch, you can hammer your side seams before stitching to reduce the bulk. Be sure not to hammer your zipper. I sometimes like to go over this section twice to be sure that the stitching is secure. You don't have to go around the entire pouch twice, but going over the zipper section will secure your bag with wear. Once our pouch is stitched together, cut all 4 corners on your 1-inch lines. Next, we are creating our flat bottoms. On each corner, pull fabrics apart from each other and bring the corners together, matching stitched lines together and cut edges together. Fold each seam allowance to opposite sides to reduce bulk. And you can continue this with the other 3 corners. I like to keep my seam allowances folded the same ways for crisper lines and just so it sits a little bit nicer. Because there's no opening on the exterior side, it may be a little bit more difficult to pull the fabrics apart from each other, but just keep working at it. Now it's time to stitch our corners. Again, we are stitching at the 3/8 inch seam allowance, and be sure to backstitch at your ends. Since bag bottoms can go through some wear, much like our zipper tabs, sometimes I like to go over the entire corner again with a double stitch. We are almost finished. Now we are turning our bag right sides out. Start by turning your lining through the pouch opening. Once I get started, I like to roll my pouch creating a long tube, which is then passed through the opening. Push out your lining corners and unzip your zipper the rest of the way. Pull the exterior out of the bag and push out the exterior corners. Flip your zipper up and push out your zipper tabs. Sometimes I find it helpful to use a wooden dowel for corners and the zipper tabs. And now it's time to close our pouch opening. First, iron your lining flat, making sure your edges line up. You can certainly hand stitch this section, but I love the ease of doing it by machine. Top stitch your lining closed. Be sure that you are starting slightly before the opening and continuing the stitch slightly after the opening to completely enclose the bag. Push your lining to the interior of your pouch. Match up your bottoms, and you're finished.